Hello, my name is Laura Hackle, and today I'll be covering 2016's Drawing Editor Upgrades, Project Defined Output, and the Transmittal Tool. In this webinar, you will learn how to add new items into Drawing Editor, how to export using the Project Defined Output, and how to use the Transmittal Tool. SDS2 2016 has upgrades to Drawing Editor, which include angle dimensions and hatching. The Project Defined Output and Transmittal Tool will save time exporting your items to send to someone else. The first thing that we're going to cover are the Drawing Editor upgrades. Drawing Item Preview. When adding items into Drawing Editor, you will now see a preview of this item as it's being added instead of after. This is to give the user visual feedback to ensure it is being added correctly. So the first one that I'm going to do is open up my first beam here. I'll unshorten it. And so to add in dimensions, if I do dimension add, it asks me to pick which type of dimension I want to add before actually picking the points. So I have an actual, vertical, or horizontal. This is not any more clicks than previous, but it's just changing the order of the mouse clicks. So I'll pick a horizontal, and I'm going to start picking my points here. Now you'll see as I start picking my points, a preview starts to show up of those dimensions being added. So I have all my points picked. Once I'm finished, I'll right click to return, and then I'll locate. Go ahead and shorten this drawing back up, and you'll see now that as I started adding in those dimensions, it showed me the preview there. Some other items that show a drawing item preview are angle dimensions, which we'll cover next, arcs, arc dimensions, bevel symbols, bolts, circles, clouds, dimensions, holes, hole symbol add, hole symbol combo, lines, pointers, weld symbol add, and weld symbol combo. So the next thing that we're going to do is the angle dimensions. To add this, I'm going to unshorten my drawing and then go to my Objects pull down, Angle Dimension, and then Add. SDS2 will prompt you to pick two lines to add an angle dimension between. These can be any line, construction line, or polygon side. So what I'm going to pick is my polygons. Now you see it shows me a preview there before I actually locate that angle dimension. And if I go and move between the quadrants, you'll see that my dimension changes. I'm going to pick this point right here. You can rotate by just left click and dragging your mouse. You can rotate that dimension. I'll come back to that in a second. They can also be displayed in either degrees or radians. So in my options, fabricator options, dimensioning criteria, down at the bottom here you can display measurement unit for angle dimensions in degrees or radians. And then we also have our angle dimension precision, so that's to the decimal places. So right now it's at 2. You can also change this by just editing an angle dimension. and there's measurement units, and if I click on radians, it'll change the radians. I can move this by holding down my shift key and moving it out to the left. So shift and left click. If I change this back to degrees, I can rotate it about the arc. The next thing we have is hatching. You cannot add hatching in SCS2 by defining an area to be filled with a hatch or by selecting a polygon to fill with hatching. So to do this, I go to Objects, Hatch. There's Add Select Polygon or Add a Define Polygon. The first one we're going to do is Add Select Polygon. I'll select the polygon that I want to add in the hatch. Once I'm finished with that, I'll right click OK. And here's my hatch add. So I can fill with a hatch or I can fill with a solid color. We're going to do a hatch and then the pattern. If I drop this down, I could do a checkered plate, for instance. Maybe I want that at a 45-degree angle. I could also change the scale, which I'll do later on. Then also there's a plot defined polygon, so that would be this area right here, which I'll come back to. So right now it's grayed out. I'll come back to this later on, like I stated, to show what that means. So here's at 45-degree angle. I can also add in my own hatch. I'll just change this back to 0. And there is these 3 dotted lines, or 3 dots over here. I can browse. I have a hatch pattern right here, so if I hit open and hit OK, here's a hatch that I imported in. It's a .pat file. So now if I were to edit this by just double clicking and browse, it automatically takes me to my data directory, my jobs, my webinar, which that would be my job name, and then there's a hatches. So since this is in my hatches folder that's inside my job, I can then send this job to someone and that hatch will be included. If I want this hatch to show up, so now it's in my drop-down list, if I want that to show up for every job, I can go to my data directory, and then there is a hatches folder inside the data directory. So I could load that inside of there. So I could just copy that file and paste it inside of here, and then it would show up in all of my jobs. Now the thing is though, if you send this job to someone else, it does need to be located inside the hatches folder inside your specific job. So you would have to copy that over if you want the hatch to be included when you send the job to someone. The system generated hatching that was in previous versions, that would be the same as how it used to be. It won't be, you can't edit it like this new hatch command. There's also a selection filter for hatching. So if I drop this down and go to hatches, I can select this and delete. Otherwise it would delete that whole polygon with it. If I undo this, you can also go to my objects pull down, hatch, and you can erase as well. You can also define a polygon or define a hatch. So if I go to hatch, I can add define polygon. So this would be selecting my own area that I want to actually add in the hatch. So here we have the round corners and the radius. I'm just going to drag from top left to bottom right. And I have my hatch here. I'll just change this to checkered plate. I'll put the scale at 0.5. And here's where it says the plot define polygon. So these lines right here that make up that hatch, do you want those to plot out? And then the last thing, this is with a hatch. Otherwise you could do a solid color. Pick any color here, and it would do a solid color as well. The next thing is font styles. So if I edit this label here, we now have an edit label box that pops up. It's giving you control over the individual characters in that label. So this means that each character in the label can have its own color, size, font, and etc. New options have been added for underline and strike through of characters. So maybe this first line here, maybe it's a little small. Over on the left-hand side, there is a scroll to zoom in and out. So I'll just zoom in right here. Maybe this first line, I want it to be a different font. So we have our view that it's in, the layer, the origin. If you want a border, we are going to underline this one. Then I have my justification, the pen, the font. I'm going to change this font. The font style. We have the font size, the ratio, and then we have a rotation. So if I do that one, maybe this one I want to strike through. So it changes those for those individual characters in the label. Change this back to SCS2. Take these off. Maybe I just want my near side and far side to stand out. So that gives a preview of what exactly it's going to look like inside on the drawing. Now if I don't want this anymore, I can hit this % right over here, and it takes it back to how it was originally. The same thing would be like with dimension. So if I edit dimension, it's going to have the same window here. It's just a preview of exactly how it's going to show up on the drawing. Next we have eView label enhancements. So I'm going to open up my second floor here. And maybe I want to move all 4 of these labels at once. I can hold down my Shift key to select multiple labels at once now on the eView, and I can just drag by left click, and I can drag them down at the exact same time. If I move this over here, if I hold down my Shift and Control key at the same time, this is going to rotate and snap at 45-degree increments. So it's snapping in at those 45-degree increments. So again, that's Shift and Control. This will also work for any other label inside of Drawing Editor now. We made disabling rules for templates a lot easier in 2016. So if I'm going to open up a column detail here. So sometimes people don't want to see the non-standard hole dimension on cap and base plates for columns. This will only disable it for this specific situation. So maybe I don't want to see the 2 inches in the horizontal and the 2 inches in the vertical. So I can select that dimension. Now I can right click, template rules, and I can disable rule. That's also in my process pull down as well. Template detailing tools, and there's disable creating rule. So if I select this, right click, template rules, disable rule, this is going to disable that specific rule. You will want to make sure that you either take note of the rule that you are disabling or you just take a screenshot of this in case in the future you want to enable it again. So I could take a screenshot of this and save it. So it's saying, do I want to disable this rule? I'll say yes. I'm going to also disable this rule. Like I stated, you'll want to take note of which rule that you're actually disabling. Now if I redetail this, so detail current piece mark or DC on the keyboard and hit OK. Now this only does work to disable a rule if it was detailed using templates. So now we see that those dimensions do not show up anymore. Now if I go to another column that has the same situation, so maybe 16C1, I come down here. They are different dimensions, but they still are the non-standard hole dimensions on the cap and base plates on the column. I can just redetail this piece mark, or sorry, redetail the member. And now you see that they do not show up anymore. So it's the whole rule that was for the horizontal and vertical. Now if I like right clicked on here, maybe I didn't want to see this dimension, right click, template rules, and disable a template. You'll want to be very careful with that because you could lose a whole bunch of other dimensions because a template could include hundreds of other rules. So if I would make sure that you're just disabling the rule unless you know for sure what you're disabling on the template. We can also edit templates. So I'll open up 1B5 here, and I have a cut flange flush on my near side. I can select it and then right click, template rules, and edit rule. I know that where this is located under my dimension, and I'll edit the item. So here I'm just going to be changing the Python variable for the cut flange flush rule. I don't want it to say the cut flange flush. I want it to always say cut and grind. Like I said, I can scroll in here, zoom in. So maybe I want to say cut and grind and hit OK. And then OK. And I'll just save that version. And now I'll redetail. And now it states cut and grind. We also have drawing auto recovery. Now in 2016, it has an auto recovery feature that will automatically save recover drawings at a set time interval. The purpose of this was to create files that can be recovered in the event that an error that interrupts or closes drawing editor session. So to change this, you can go into your user options either on your main menu or through here, and there's an interface tab. And down at the bottom, there's drawing auto recovery settings. Automatically create recovery files interval. Maybe I want to just change this to a minute just to show you. So it just replaces that old recovery file each time it creates one. So it's not making the file huge. So for instance, I'm going to open up 2B1. And maybe I'm going to be changing, I'm just going to move some stuff around so you can see. And then I'm going to go ahead and open up my data directory just to show you the file that it's going to be creating. So go to my jobs. There's a PCM folder. And I know this is 19. So here in a moment, it will be covering or creating an auto recovery. So I'm just going to keep moving some stuff around. So here under 19, we have auto saved. So now that I have this just in an instance, maybe I want to do, I'm just going to kill the software just to create an error here. So I'll go to utility functions. I'll go back into drawing editor and go to 2B1. And it pops up a message now. So let's say I had a power outage or something and I had that restored on, so it had a recovery file in it. It's asking me, do I want to restore my work from auto save drawing? If I click yes, then it's going to go to where I had the last saved file, the last auto recovery file. If I said no there, it would go back to the last manual save. So here, if I save, or if I said yes to that auto recovery file and I go next and I say no to saving this, if I go back, it's back to the original state, and I'll show you in the PCM folder, now 19 is gone. So I said no to the auto recovery, so it went back to the last manual state that it was saved in. And in that case, it was never saved in my drawing. So I'm just saying that the auto recovery will go every minute like I put in that increment. But if you have a power outage or something and you say no to opening up that auto saved file, go back to the last manual state. Or if you said yes and said no to saving, then it will go back to the last manual state again. The next thing we have is our project defined output. Now you can set up per job where you want things saved to when doing output locations. So go ahead and close this. And in my job or fabricator options, under my fabricator setup, there is project defined output. So the file name would be for like a single file created, or the directory would be for multiple files. In the directory for my CNC, for example, I want this to go to my desktop, and I have a CNC folder created. So I'm going to go to my CNC. For this specific job, I always want it to go to this specific folder. I'll click OK. And then I do need to go into my user options, go to output. For my CNC, I'm going to change that to CNC and then edit that CNC. And then here, above disk, there is a project defined output location. So I want to override where it's set up to where I have for this output. So I'm going to click on project defined output location. Like this though, it is in your user options, so that is per computer. I'll hit OK. So each computer, you would have to go into your user options and hit project defined output. So I'll go to my CNC and I'll just download maybe a few files here. Now you will see my destination. It does state now it's using my project. If I hit here, project defined output location. Oh, just kidding. So now if I go to that folder, those CNC files are now located inside there. The last we have is the Transmittal Tool. You can export multiple things at once now using that Transmittal Tool. So on my main menu, down at the bottom under miscellaneous options, there is a transmittal. So I'm going to start up in the upper right corner. We have location. I'm going to be saving this configuration later on. But my directory, maybe I want that to go to my desktop. My folder name, I want that to be called my transmittal. I am going to zip this file. For my sheet items, for my detail sheets, I want PDFs created. For my erection sheets, I want DWGs created. We have MRP, so if I check this on, maybe I want to export my FabTrol, and if I check this on, I want to also export my KISS. I'm just going to export my KISS here, but you could do both. When it states for a file name, you will need to put something in there or it will not create that specific file if it's left blank. So I'm going to go ahead and put in KISS export. I'll check on that I want CNC files created. My SDS2 model, the file, packed file name, I'll just call this my transmittal job. My packed job name, if I click on that, it will bring my actual name of my job. My model formats, I can check this on. Maybe I want to send an IFC. You do need to put in the file name, so I'll put my transmittal IFC. And maybe I also want to send a DWG. Moving down, reports. I'll say I want to send my design calcs, and maybe in my SDS2 user, go to my material summary by sheet, and just call material summary. And then maybe I just want to export on the left side. I'm going to uncheck details, submembers. I just want my detail sheets and my erection sheets. So I'm just going to select a few of my detail sheets, and then I'll select my erection sheets as well. So maybe this is what I always want to send to people. So I could create a configuration. So where it says location, configuration, there is a floppy disk or a save file. So if I do that, I'm going to call this default transmittal. And now it will be in my drop down list. So if I hit run, it's going to take a second here. You will see that my transmittal got created over on the left side. And then it's going to start exporting all of this information. But it is nice that you can export it all at once. This is going to be for my CNC files. I can see here for my destination it says project. So that's the only one I changed. So I'll just put these 3 files. And then hit OK. It exported my IFC. That's just the rose warning for the IFC. So now if I come over here on my left side, there is my transmittal that's zipped up. I can just double click on it. So I have my CNC, those 3 files that I selected. I have my detail sheets that are PDFs that I selected. I have my erection sheets that I selected for DWGs. My model files. So I have my DWG and my IFC file. My KISS. The reports did not show up. Sometimes it does not show up if it can't export, or so like if you have something selected and it doesn't show up for like the actual, I guess it can't run on the thing that you have selected, it just won't create a file. And then I have my STS2 model and then a selection list. So then I could put that in my transmittal as well. So that concludes today's webinar on drawing editor updates, project defined output, and the project defined output